Wow, well that was it's quite a long day actually. Friday is, I mean, it hasn't changed a lot in recent times, but it is a big day. You have untimed practice for F2 and F3, then qualifying for F2 and F3, and you have 2 untimed F1 sessions. A lot of action. If you were a fan just going to a race, Friday would be a day you would not want to miss, assuming allowed in the first place, of course, which is always these days very, very unlikely. But anyway, yeah, news today that some new circuits joining the calendar, which is great. I'm really pleased Turkey's back there. Lovely circuit, one of Herman Tilke's better designs, and some great corners there. Lots, just a good place. I'm surprised Turkey's even exists, to be honest. I would have thought by now it would become just sort of a, I don't know what, car park buried in the sand or something. But it's, yeah, it's there, and that's good. Looking forward to Turkey very much. Bahrain, they're going to do a second race at Bahrain on the outer circuit, which basically means I think it's basically a square, not a lot of corners, and it's a very short lap, well under a minute. So I think Formula One just playing around a little bit with the format, with what they can do, hoping that it'll be an incredibly close race because there aren't many corners, and you know, who knows what will happen. Probably they'll be lapping the back markers within about 10 laps or something like that, the Mercs that is. So it'll be an interesting experiment. Bahrain is a great circuit in other ways. I mean, I've said it before a million times, turn 9 and then the approach to 10, and then the long straight after 10, which rewards your exit, is a really, really good bit of road. And if you get it right, you can get a big advantage there, and you can be really good in defense there as well. Or attack for that matter. You can push another driver into an error, braking for the tight turn 10. So good to have Bahrain back on the calendar. Good to have 3 races in Italy. Haven't really spoken much about those, but Mugello should be fabulous. And obviously Imola is Imola, isn't it? Just so many conflicting memories of Imola. Obviously the 94 race is what most people remember, and me included. But the first time I went to Imola actually was 1979. It was a non-championship Formula One race. It was very hot. I remember it was back end of August, I guess, probably about this time, maybe a little bit earlier. And Carlos Reutemann was in a Lotus 79. Nicky was in the Brabham Alpha. And Nicky won the race. But I remember Carlos drove there in his Lotus Esprit company car from Monaco, and when Chapman arrived, he said, "Oh, how was the trip, Carlos?" And Carlos said something like, "Oh, very good. The Esprit handled better than the 79," which didn't impress Chapman too much, of course. But you know, the 79 that year was not a great car. But we stayed in Bologna, I remember, and it was just a lovely, dusty, hot race, classic Italian motor race. Very different now, of course, the whole feel for Imola, but yeah, that was a nice memory. Anyway, here we are at Spa this weekend. A lot of thoughts of Antoine Hubert and that horrendous accident, which actually began when poor Giuliano Alesi spun. I think he was trying to go flat through Eau Rouge and full tanks and didn't work out, and then everybody else got involved as a result. So he's had to live with that, and it's obviously difficult for him, and I don't know whether his mind was on that or what, but when he went out for practice, untimed practice this morning, he went out and within about 10 metres of leaving the pit lane, he lost it on cold tyres and went into he didn't hit the car that hard, but he hit a barrier in his F2 car, which subsequently brought F1 second practice to a halt because that barrier then collapsed and fell onto the track. So yeah, a lot of talk about, you know, drivers getting back into their cars and getting on with motor racing after what happened last year and all the memories. And if you take the longer view, you know, Spa is all about that, isn't it? It's all about overcoming those tragedies. Go back to Dick Seaman, 39, trying to win that race for Mercedes in the wet, in that accident, from which today he probably would have walked away. And then 60, obviously, when Sterling had that huge shunt, which nearly cost him his life, but didn't. He recovered from that, and recovered really well. But we had the deaths of Chris Bristow and Alan Stacey on the same day in the Belgian Grand Prix 1960. And who could ever forget that? And I've missed actually 58, Archie Scott Brown, in the sports car race, Grand Prix, Spa Grand Prix I think it was called, on the approach to just after Blanchimont as well, on the uphill approach. So yeah, and then obviously Stefan Beloff and many other fatalities in other categories of racing. Spa is Jim Clark hated Spa, partly because of that. Well, 58, Archie Scott Brown, he was in that race, and then obviously 60. And I think we're allowed to hate Spa because it's got this terrible record, isn't it, of all these tragedies. And the new Spa, of course, is much, much safer, but it still can happen. It can still bite us, and that's what this weekend is a reminder of, I think. But moving on to what happened today, to me this will be remembered for the day when Ferrari just sunk to an all-time recent low. They just never looked quick. Charles Leclerc did a couple of flying laps early on. By which, I don't mean flying as in pace, I mean flying as in actually doing a lap. And thereafter was just going out, trying something, coming back into the pits after one lap. And they're slow on the straight. If they try to take off wing, they're incredibly slow in sector 2. Probably, I would guess they're going to have to run a lot more wing and just try to be quick, at least in sector 2, because going the other way hasn't helped them at all. They're slower than Alfa Romeo right now. And you can trace this back, I guess, to the engine regulation that was clamped down Austin last year, how that's changed everything for them. And it's sad, isn't it? It's very sad. I'm not the world's greatest Ferrari fan, as you probably know if you've been watching my channel for a long time. I've always been a Lotus man and Jim Clark man. Jimmy never actually drove a Ferrari. He did sit in a shark nose at one point, sitting in the pit lane at Monaco. That's the sort of thing drivers do today, sit in their opponents' cars. James Hunt sat in Nicky's Ferrari once in '76, I think at Zolder, may have been Spain. Yeah, it's nice when they did that, but no more. Too many sponsors, too many vested interests. So yeah, but I do see how important Ferrari are for Formula One and for the business and for everything, for the fans really. I mean, there are more Ferrari fans probably than any other on the planet. So it's always a shame when Ferrari go into a slump like this, a real slump. They did, in '73 it was a similar thing. They just couldn't get the car to work at all. And in the end, Enzo Ferrari just said, right, enough's enough and let's stop, and built a completely new car, and they went racing again, a whole new era. That's what will eventually happen. Ferrari will get it together eventually, no question. But right now, it is a major slump, and it's a sad thing. That was the main thing from today, I think. Daniel Ricciardo was really quick, which was good on the soft tyre. Not quite sure how realistic that is when they all get down to qualifying tomorrow. But I mean, if it's wet or something like that, which it might be, Spa, it did rain today, particularly in the F3 qualifying session. Anything, a Daniel Ricciardo, certainly a Max, is going to be right up there. Max Verstappen looked really good again. Alex Albon, pretty quick on the soft tyre. I think, the soft tyre with good grip, good balance is going to nullify some of the things that he's having trouble with. And he's very good when the car's got a lot of grip and a lot of balance. He's going to be really quick. The slightly odd thing is how many drivers are complaining at the moment of vibration particularly on the soft tyre. The red tyre just sort of happens. And I was speculating today with Sam Collins, the co-commentator, about whether or not this might be related to some sort of sidewall stress thing that's happening on the soft tyre, with the amount of grip that's going through, the amount of G-loading that's going through the tyre in various directions. So let's hope that's not the case. But vibration is always a worrying thing. It may not even be the tyres, but they certainly seem to be related to putting on the red tyre at the moment. Vibration is something a racing driver never likes to feel, because you just don't know what it means, and it's just coming through the steering, you're feeling it, and it could be anything. Great drivers, the minute they feel a vibration, all their senses are aware, and usually they'll come in and stop until the source of the vibration is discovered. Sometimes it isn't, obviously, and if it's a tyre thing, it's it's slightly worrying. But I'm sure Pirelli on these sorts of issues, getting to the bottom of what causes this or that, Pirelli are really good. So I'm sure it's going to be okay. So Lewis obviously still good. Valtteri looks pretty good, doesn't he? I don't expect that much of a race between those two, to be honest. But you know, they could be all right. Max is there or thereabouts in terms of the Mercs, but he's driving really well. And then you got the Racing Points. No surprise there to see the Racing Points very good around Spa. Very quick in a straight line too, which might or might not be significant on race day. Probably will be significant, actually. If they got a straight line speed advantage and they're not actually losing very much in Sector 2, they will be set for a really good race weekend. Anyway, relatively short video this one, because not that much more to say about today and what's happened. I think as the weekend gathers pace to be a little bit more, but wanted to just report back from a hectic day, if you take F3, F2 into account, and all that's been going on. You can see all the results there on other places for sure, so you don't really need my comment there. But in F2, really good to see Yuki Tsunoda and Hiro Matsushita first and third. Great result for Honda. And Nikita Mazepin P2 for High Tech on the front row of the grid for the Formula 2 race. He's, of course, the Russian that won feature race at Silverstone, and he's getting better in all the time. Very, very good. So he's one of the key players at High Tech, and who knows where that team's going to be in 3 or 4 years now. My bet is they'll be in Formula 1, and they'll be in Formula 1 in their own way, and it's looking really good, really interesting future for that team, I think. So yeah, that's Friday. See you tomorrow.